Alexander Blackwood was the kind of man who commanded attention without even trying. With his tailored suits, confident stride, and piercing gaze, he moved through the world as though it were his personal stage. Wealth, power, and charm seemed to follow him naturally, the way light follows the sun. In boardrooms, he was admired, respected, even envied. Investors sought his guidance, colleagues whispered about his brilliance, and competitors quietly acknowledged that Alexander was untouchable in his realm. Yet, behind the polished exterior of this self-assured mogul, there existed subtle complexities, cracks hidden beneath layers of wealth and influence. Victoria Blackwood, his wife, was the very image of grace and elegance. Pregnant with their first child, she carried herself with a serene dignity that captured the attention of everyone around her. Her warm smile, gentle gestures, and natural kindness made her beloved not only by friends and family but by everyone who crossed her path. Yet beneath the surface, worry tugged at her heart. She had always trusted Alexander completely, believing in the love they had shared, the life they had built together. But lately, small things had begun to unsettle her. Missed calls, excuses for late-night absences, and the occasional flicker of distraction in his eyes had slowly started to gnaw at her peace of mind. Alexander's public persona remained impeccable. At charity events, he laughed warmly, placed tender hands on Victoria's back, and praised her charm and intelligence to anyone who would listen. Friends and acquaintances saw the perfect couple, the flawless life, the picture of love and devotion. But Victoria, with her keen intuition and now heightened sensitivity from her pregnancy, could feel the distance creeping between them. She noticed the way his phone sometimes vibrated in his hand, how his eyes occasionally softened towards something she could not see, or the faint smile that seemed to belong to someone else. She tried to dismiss it, chalk it up to stress or work obligations, convincing herself that worrying was unnecessary. Yet the unease remained, settling like a quiet storm in the pit of her stomach. She carefully hid her suspicions, unwilling to disturb the fragile balance of their home or jeopardize the safety and serenity of the life she was nurturing within her. Even as she smiled, laughed, and played the devoted wife in public, a subtle vigilance remained behind her calm facade. She sensed something was amiss, a shadow on the bright life she had imagined, but she kept it contained, protecting herself and her unborn child with quiet determination. Every glance at Alexander now carried a hidden question, a whisper of doubt she refused to voice, and the tension, though silent, was growing, threading itself through the fabric of their seemingly perfect world. Sophia Reynolds was everything that Alexander Blackwood's world was not. Young, ambitious, and radiantly seductive, she moved through life with a confidence that made her presence impossible to ignore. There was a spark in her eyes, a mischievous glint that hinted at secrets she kept just for herself, and a charm that effortlessly drew people in. In the corporate gatherings where Alexander occasionally crossed paths with her, she had always been polite, yet there was a magnetic energy that neither of them could deny. What began as casual admiration soon evolved into something far more dangerous, a connection that neither could fully rationalize but both secretly craved. The first messages came subtly. A brief compliment on Alexander's public speech, a shared joke about business news, a carefully worded question that only he could answer. The thrill of secrecy quickly gripped Alexander, filling a void he hadn't realized existed. Each late-night ping on his phone became a moment of temptation, a whisper of excitement he felt guilty for craving. He knew it was wrong. He had a wife, Victoria, beautiful and devoted, carrying his child. And yet, the moral conflict twisted within him like a slow-burning fire. Every reply to Sophia's messages, every careful word he typed, felt like betrayal, yet it was exhilarating in a way he had not anticipated in years. Their encounters remained clandestine. Stolen glances in crowded rooms, lingering touches that seemed accidental but were anything but, and subtle hints of mutual understanding created a secret language between them. Dinner invitations were disguised as business meetings or chance encounters, each arranged with meticulous care to avoid suspicion. The secrecy itself became intoxicating, a forbidden thrill that neither Alexander nor Sophia could resist. He found himself thinking about her when he should have been focused on Victoria, replaying their conversations, anticipating the next message, and feeling both guilt and desire in equal measure. Meanwhile, Victoria sensed the subtle changes in Alexander's behavior. The phone he kept closer than usual, the brief moments of distraction, and the fleeting expressions of emotion that she couldn't read, they all tugged at her intuition. Though she could not see the truth yet, a quiet unease settled within her. She noticed patterns, minor inconsistencies, and a tension in the air that had no apparent cause. Her heart, attuned to his moods from months of shared life and her own heightened sensitivity during pregnancy, began whispering warnings that she refused to act on yet, unwilling to believe the worst. The allure of Sophia was undeniable, a whirlwind of energy, excitement, and temptation that Alexander had not felt in years. In contrast, his marriage offered stability, love, and the promise of family. Each moment with Sophia became a silent battle between desire and duty, thrill and conscience, leaving Alexander suspended in a dangerous tension, unaware that every step he took toward forbidden pleasure edged him closer to a confrontation he could not yet imagine. Victoria felt a growing unease that clung to her like a shadow she could not shake. The little things Alexander had once done casually, like answering a message with a warm smile or lingering by her side in conversation, had been replaced by distant glances, hurried exits, and a phone that never seemed far from his hand. She tried to tell herself it was stress from work, the pressure of running multiple businesses, or even simple forgetfulness, but deep down, a gnawing fear began to take hold. What if the changes in him were more than just temporary distractions? What if her marriage, the life they had built together, was quietly unraveling while she remained blind to it? Her thoughts constantly returned to the baby growing inside her. She worried about how the tension, the uncertainty, and the emotional strain could affect her. She tried to breathe deeply, to maintain calm, but anxiety kept threading itself through every moment of the day. Every time she caught Alexander slipping into secrecy, closing his laptop hastily, stepping out for private calls, or offering vague excuses, her mind raced. Fear and love battled within her, each pang of suspicion tearing at her heart while she desperately hoped she was wrong. Clara, her closest friend and confidant, had noticed the subtle shift in Victoria as well. Over coffee one afternoon, she observed Victoria's restless movements, the way her eyes lingered anxiously on her phone, and the quiet tension in her voice. "You've been distracted," Clara remarked gently, reaching out to take her hand. "Something's bothering you." "I can see it." Victoria forced a faint smile, brushing off the concern, though inside she craved the reassurance of someone acknowledging the fear she dared not voice aloud. Clara's insight only heightened her sense that perhaps she could no longer ignore the changes in Alexander, that maybe her intuition had been right all along. One evening, Victoria attempted to bridge the widening gap. She reached for Alexander, trying to draw him into conversation about plans for the upcoming weeks, the nursery, or simply the pregnancy. But each time, she was met with cold excuses, vague reassurances, and a distracted manner that left her feeling isolated. The distance between them seemed to stretch further, a quiet but painful chasm growing where intimacy and trust had once thrived. It was during one of these moments of quiet observation that she overheard a fragment of a conversation Alexander had with a colleague. The words were brief but unmistakable: a dinner arrangement with another woman, a meeting disguised as a professional engagement. Her heart tightened as a cold wave of realization washed over her, confirming the suspicions she had fought so hard to suppress. The unease was no longer subtle, it had become a sharp, undeniable truth, planting the seeds for a storm that was about to engulf her carefully curated world. The restaurant was tucked away on a quiet street, its soft amber lighting casting a warm, intimate glow over the polished wooden tables and velvet-upholstered chairs. Only a few patrons lingered, giving the space an air of secluded exclusivity that made it perfect for those seeking privacy. Crystal glasses sparkled on the table before Alexander and Sophia, reflecting the flickering candlelight, while the aroma of roasted meats, fresh herbs, and delicate pastries mingled with the subtle scent of fine wine. The room seemed almost suspended in time, as if it existed solely for this clandestine encounter. Sophia leaned back slightly, her eyes glinting with playful mischief as she studied Alexander. "So, this is the life of Alexander Blackwood," she teased softly, her voice a mixture of curiosity and challenge. "Powerful, wealthy, adored, yet here you are, sneaking away to meet me." I must say, it has a certain thrill. Alexander's chest tightened, a mixture of exhilaration and guilt pressing against him. Every word from Sophia was like a spark striking dry tinder. He wanted her, craved this forbidden connection, yet the weight of his responsibilities in his marriage gnawed at the edges of his desire. The waiter poured the wine with practiced precision, the deep red liquid catching the light as it flowed into their glasses. Alexander took a careful sip, forcing his expression into casual charm, but inside, turmoil raged. Guilt clawed at him, sharp and insistent, reminding him of Victoria, of the life they had built together, and the unborn child who had no choice in the adult's deceit. Yet at the same time, the thrill of secrecy, the forbidden allure of Sophia's presence, pulled him further into the moment, blurring the lines between right and wrong. Sophia reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand lightly. "You look tense," she murmured, her lips curved in a teasing smile. "Is it because you know this is wrong, or because it's so exciting?" Alexander swallowed hard, unable to respond. The tension between desire and guilt made every movement, every glance, feel electric. Unbeknownst to them, Victoria was near, concealed behind a partition that gave her a clear view of the couple. Her heart pounded as she watched Alexander laugh at something Sophia whispered, a laugh that had once been reserved solely for her. Shock froze her in place, a raw mix of heartbreak, fear, and rage flooding her chest. The betrayal was more vivid and cruel than she had ever imagined. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the partition, trying to ground herself, to process the image of her husband with another woman. Every gesture, every whispered word, felt like a physical blow, each moment deepening the ache in her chest. She wanted to scream, to confront, to make him stop, but she remained hidden, watching silently as her worst fears came alive before her eyes. The luxurious restaurant, the candlelight, the laughter, all of it twisted into a tableau of betrayal that would remain seared in her memory. The mix of fear, rage, and heartbreak was unbearable, yet beneath it simmered a new, quiet resolve. She would not let this break her. Not now. Not ever. Victoria remained hidden behind the partition, her body pressed slightly against the wall as she forced herself to breathe slowly. Every glance Alexander cast toward Sophia, every soft laugh that seemed to belong to another woman, stabbed at her heart with a precision that left her dizzy and cold. The intimacy of the stolen touches, the casual ease with which he leaned toward Sophia, made the betrayal tangible, almost suffocating. She could hear the subtle cadence of his voice, the way it carried warmth and familiarity to someone other than her, and each sound felt like a cruel echo of the life she had imagined. The irony of the situation was almost unbearable. Alexander, completely unaware of Victoria's presence, continued his laughter, his flirtatious remarks, his subtle confessions to a woman who had no right to them. Victoria, meanwhile, absorbed every detail, the tilt of his head, the softness of his gaze, the small gestures that had once been hers alone. She was powerless to stop it, yet fully awake to every act of betrayal. It was a strange torment, this mixture of helplessness and hyper-awareness, a cruel gift of clarity that left her both enraged and achingly heartbroken. Even as the emotional pain swelled within her, Victoria reminded herself to maintain control. The life she carried inside her was more important than any outburst, any confrontation that might satisfy a fleeting need for vengeance. She steadied her breathing, pressing a hand against her stomach, feeling the subtle movements of her unborn child. Every tremor, every tiny kick, became a lifeline, a reason to temper her emotions, to hold back the scream that threatened to escape her lips. She would not allow this moment to destroy the fragile life she nurtured. Yet the tension within her did not ease. Should she confront Alexander now, demanding answers and explanations, or should she continue to gather evidence, building a shield of knowledge before taking action? The questions spun in her mind, tangled with heartbreak, anger, and the sting of betrayal. She weighed every option silently, knowing that any wrong move could weaken her position or shatter her composure. Amidst the storm of emotions, Victoria made a quiet vow to herself. She would protect herself and her child above all else. She would reclaim her dignity, refusing to allow her heart to be broken openly in front of the man who had so carelessly betrayed her. Each whispered word of Alexander and Sophia became fuel for her resolve, each laugh and touch a reminder of why she needed to stand strong. She would not act impulsively. She would not crumble. Instead, she would endure, silently gathering strength, until the moment came when she could rise, unshakable, reclaiming her life on her own terms. Alexander stepped out of the restaurant with Sophia at his side, the night air cool against his face. He wore a confident smile, the kind that suggested complete control over every aspect of his life. The subtle thrill of the evening still lingered in his chest, the intoxicating mix of guilt and desire leaving him lightheaded and reckless. He had no idea that Victoria had witnessed everything, no inkling that the woman he promised to love and protect had silently absorbed every detail of his betrayal. In his mind, the evening had been flawless, a masterclass in discretion and charm. As they walked down the quiet street, Alexander's words flowed easily, laced with bravado. He boasted about his ability to balance the perfect double life, speaking to Sophia as though they were conspirators in a grand game only they understood. Each careless remark, each laugh that escaped without thought, revealed his arrogance and moral blind spot. He did not consider the consequences, the collateral damage of his actions, nor did he suspect that the person most affected was watching him from the shadows. His unawareness was staggering, and the confidence with which he carried himself only deepened the injustice of the betrayal. Victoria followed discreetly, keeping to the shadows, her eyes fixed on every movement, every word. She felt a strange mixture of rage and empowerment. He was oblivious to her presence, yet in his ignorance, he had revealed more about himself than she had ever known. Each boast, each careless admission, became a piece of a puzzle she could now use to protect herself and her child. Her silence was no longer passive, it was deliberate, a shield and a weapon at the same time. Alexander's arrogance, his blindness to the truth, had given her an advantage she was determined to use. Even as she processed the scene, Victoria noticed small cracks in Alexander's armor, fleeting moments where his confidence faltered. A nervous glance at the street corner, a brief hesitation before entering a car, tiny, almost imperceptible signs of vulnerability that hinted at his potential exposure. These private moments were subtle but powerful, reminders that he was not invincible, that even the most polished facade could crumble. In that quiet, tense pursuit, Victoria made a silent promise to herself: she would plan carefully, act wisely, and reclaim her life. She would protect her child and herself, and she would not allow Alexander's arrogance to dictate her fate. The awareness of his flaws, his unawareness, and the vulnerability she now recognized planted the seeds for a future in which she held all the power. Victoria felt the weight of her pregnancy more acutely now than ever. The physical changes, the growing belly, the occasional waves of nausea, and the exhaustion that seeped into her bones, were compounded by the emotional strain of witnessing her husband's betrayal. Every heartbeat of the child within her reminded her of the stakes, of the life that depended on her strength and resilience. The joy that pregnancy had once promised was now laced with tension, grief, and a simmering anger that she had to conceal for the sake of appearances. Despite the turmoil, Victoria maintained an impressive facade of composure. She attended social events with grace, smiled when necessary, and spoke with warmth to acquaintances, all while keeping a careful watch on Alexander. She observed his movements, his subtle slips, and the nuances of his interactions with Sophia, committing every detail to memory. It was a delicate balance, navigating her own health, maintaining appearances, and quietly monitoring the man who had betrayed her, but Victoria's intelligence and determination allowed her to manage it all. She began keeping a discreet journal, documenting dates, times, and actions, carefully building a record of Alexander's duplicity. Each note, each entry, strengthened her resolve and prepared her for a confrontation that would one day be inevitable. Yet even as she strategized, moments of vulnerability surfaced. In quiet evenings, she would close her eyes and recall flashes of their past, the warmth of Alexander's early affection, the laughter they had shared, and the tenderness that had once defined their marriage. These memories cut through the present like sharp blades, reminders of love lost and trust betrayed. She felt pangs of longing for the intimacy and safety she had once known, and for a fleeting second, she allowed herself to imagine what could have been, before she reminded herself of the reality she now faced. These reflections only fueled her determination. She understood that her primary responsibility was to herself and her child. The betrayal, while deeply painful, had awakened a protective instinct within her, one that would guide every action she took. She resolved not to crumble, not to allow Alexander's choices to define her life or the life of her unborn child. In the quiet of her home, as she placed a hand gently on her growing belly, Victoria whispered a vow to herself: she would safeguard her child, reclaim her dignity, and build a future free from the shadow of Alexander's deception. No matter the pain, no matter the sacrifice, she would endure, and she would rise stronger than ever. Alexander's confidence with Sophia had grown unchecked, his boldness bordering on recklessness. What had once been whispered messages and carefully orchestrated encounters began to leave traces, tiny cracks in the facade he so meticulously maintained. A casually left phone with a lingering notification, a receipt from a boutique she had mentioned weeks earlier, or a hastily wrapped gift carelessly left in the back of his car, each small oversight was a thread Victoria could follow. Even in public, Alexander's arrogance bled through, his tone hinted at inside jokes with Sophia, remarks that seemed innocuous to strangers but screamed betrayal to Victoria's vigilant eyes. Victoria noticed it all, absorbing the evidence silently, cataloging every slip and mistake. She found herself replaying conversations in her mind, analyzing gestures, and mentally noting every instance of carelessness. A signature on a receipt tucked in his briefcase, a photograph slipped into an envelope he thought she wouldn't see, and a conversation overheard at a private event, all these moments became pieces of a growing puzzle. The clarity with which she saw his betrayal both pained and empowered her. Alexander remained oblivious, his arrogance blinding him to the danger Victoria posed. He assumed that because he controlled appearances, no one could touch him, and certainly not the woman he had deceived. This overconfidence made him careless, each action reinforcing the evidence Victoria was quietly collecting. Every smirk, every boast, every subtle claim of cleverness fed the storm she was preparing. He had underestimated her awareness, her intelligence, and her patience. Victoria struggled internally, balancing the raw anger that surged within her against the strategic patience she knew was necessary. Each mistake he made tempted her to confront him immediately, to unleash her fury and demand justice, but she forced herself to wait. Impulse could cost her leverage, calculated action could reclaim her dignity and secure her child's future. She imagined the confrontation in her mind, meticulously planning how it would unfold, how she could ensure that she held the upper hand without exposing herself to further emotional harm. Clara, her closest confidant, became an invaluable ally during this time. Over late-night calls and discreet meetings, Clara provided perspective, advice, and support, reminding Victoria of her strength and the importance of measured action. "Patience now will give you power later," Clara would insist, gently but firmly. Victoria absorbed these words, using them as a compass to navigate the treacherous waters around her. Every careless slip by Alexander became an opportunity, every trace of evidence a tool, and with Clara's guidance, Victoria's resolve solidified. She would confront Alexander on her terms, prepared, powerful, and unwavering. Victoria stood in the center of their opulent living room, the proofs of Alexander's betrayal carefully laid out before her. Photos, screenshots of messages, receipts, and even witness statements had been gathered with meticulous care over weeks. Each piece of evidence, once small and insignificant, now formed a damning mosaic of deception. Her heart pounded with a mixture of heartbreak and rage, yet beneath the storm of emotion, a new sense of empowerment coursed through her veins. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed it silently, and now the balance of power rested firmly in her hands. When Alexander entered, his casual confidence faltered at once. He noticed her poised stance, the sharpness in her eyes, and the spread of incriminating evidence. "Victoria, what is all this?" he asked, attempting calm, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. She did not flinch, her voice steady but cold. "Do you really think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't see every detail, every slip, every lie?" As she presented the undeniable proof, Alexander's initial denial gave way to escalating tension. He fumbled for excuses, muttering about misunderstandings and coincidences, but Victoria remained unwavering, her words precise, her evidence irrefutable. The room seemed to contract around them as the confrontation intensified. Each image, each message, each written confession left him shrinking under the weight of his own actions. Sophia, blissfully unaware of Victoria's pregnancy, had no idea of the additional stakes Alexander had ignored, adding a bitter irony to the unfolding drama. Victoria's resolve crystallized in that moment. She controlled the narrative now, her betrayal no longer a passive wound but a weapon she wielded with dignity and purpose. Alexander's attempts to interrupt, to manipulate, or to deflect only highlighted his vulnerability. For the first time, he was powerless, stripped of the arrogance and facade that had carried him through life. The confrontation ended with a quiet, decisive statement: Victoria would no longer be deceived, and she would no longer allow herself or her child to be at the mercy of his selfish desires. The aftermath was immediate and devastating. Alexander's shock and guilt consumed him as the enormity of his losses became clear. His marriage, his reputation, and the future he had taken for granted teetered on the edge of ruin. Sophia's reaction was a volatile mix of anger, confusion, and disbelief as she realized the man she had toyed with was crumbling under the consequences of his own choices. Alexander tried to explain, beg, and manipulate, but Victoria remained resolute, impervious to his pleas. The luxurious life he had flaunted, the power he had wielded so effortlessly, meant nothing in the face of betrayal and truth. Victoria emerged from the confrontation strong, composed, and fully in control of her life. The pain of heartbreak had been tempered into clarity, her sense of self sharpened by the experience. She had reclaimed her dignity, protected her child, and established an unshakable command over her own future. Alexander's world, once so meticulously curated, lay in ruins, while Victoria stepped forward into a life defined not by deception, but by resilience, courage, and empowerment. Victoria woke to a quiet morning, sunlight spilling gently through the curtains, and for the first time in months, she felt a sense of clarity that was entirely her own. The chaos and pain of the past weeks had been transformative, stripping away illusions and leaving her with the stark reality of her independence. Financially secure through her own investments and resources, emotionally fortified by the trials she had endured, and socially aware of the networks that supported her, she realized she no longer needed Alexander to define her existence. The life she had once shared with him was over, and with it came the freedom to reclaim her identity and her future. Her focus shifted naturally to motherhood, the life growing inside her serving as both motivation and anchor. She meticulously prepared for the baby, designing a nursery filled with warmth and love, reading books on parenting, and arranging a support system of trusted friends and family who would guide her through the journey ahead. Each small task, painting walls, organizing clothes, or selecting books, was infused with purpose, a tangible manifestation of her commitment to nurturing not just her child, but her own renewed sense of self. Victoria also embraced the opportunities that her independence now afforded. She revisited career plans she had put aside, exploring business ventures that allowed her creativity and intelligence to flourish. Friendships, once strained or neglected due to her focus on Alexander, were rekindled, offering both companionship and a reminder of the vibrant life she could still build. Personal growth became a priority. She took courses, attended seminars, and immersed herself in activities that nourished her mind and spirit. Every decision reinforced the autonomy she had fought to reclaim, and each step forward solidified the sense of empowerment that had been born from betrayal. Symbolically, Victoria began leaving behind the remnants of Alexander's deception. Photos, gifts, and letters that once carried emotional weight were carefully removed from her home, boxed, and stored out of sight. Each item set aside represented a piece of her past she no longer allowed to control her emotions or dictate her choices. The act was cathartic, a ritual of closure that allowed her to step fully into her new life with intention and pride. In embracing this fresh chapter, Victoria's journey reflected broader themes of resilience and female empowerment. Betrayal had been the catalyst, but it was her courage, intelligence, and determination that defined the outcome. She had turned pain into strength, heartbreak into clarity, and loss into opportunity. Victoria's future, now hers alone to shape, promised a life of dignity, purpose, and fulfillment, proof that even in the wake of deception, the human spirit could rise, unstoppable and unshaken. The aftermath of the revelations rippled far beyond the walls of Victoria's home. Alexander's carefully curated life began to crumble under the weight of public scandal and personal betrayal. News of his indiscretions, once concealed beneath layers of secrecy and charm, seeped into social circles, business acquaintances, and even the media. Colleagues and friends who had once admired him now whispered behind closed doors, questioning his integrity and judgment. The facade of power and wealth that had once commanded respect now served only as a stark contrast to his moral failings. Trust, once freely given, was gone, leaving Alexander isolated and forced to confront the magnitude of his choices in solitude. Meanwhile, Victoria's life blossomed in quiet defiance of the chaos he had caused. She gave birth to a healthy, beautiful child, a living testament to her strength and resilience. As she held her newborn for the first time, the exhaustion and pain of pregnancy and betrayal melted away, replaced by a profound sense of hope and renewal. Every tiny hand grasping hers, every coo and sigh, became a reminder that life, and love, could flourish even after betrayal. For Victoria, the child symbolized more than new life. It represented her unwavering courage, her ability to endure hardship, and her commitment to a future shaped by her own values, not the whims of a deceitful partner. In these quiet, intimate moments, Victoria felt a deep emotional closure. She smiled down at her child, her heart swelling with love and pride, realizing for the first time in months that she no longer needed Alexander's validation or presence to feel whole. Happiness, she understood, came from within, from her resilience and ability to reclaim control over her own life. Each breath she took with her newborn in her arms was a testament to the power of self-determination, of rising above betrayal to embrace authenticity and strength. Sophia, realizing the empire of deceit she had been part of was collapsing, quietly exited Alexander's life. Her anger and confusion were replaced by retreat, leaving Alexander alone to reflect on the consequences of his arrogance and betrayal. He faced the stark reality that wealth and charm could not shield him from the truth, nor could they repair the trust he had destroyed. In the end, the story left an enduring message: betrayal may expose character, but resilience, integrity, and courage define the future. Victoria emerged triumphant, her dignity intact, her child safe, and her path forward clear. Alexander, stripped of illusions, remained to ponder the cost of his actions, a cautionary figure whose mistakes underscored a timeless truth: the strength to rebuild and thrive comes not from power or wealth, but from heart, resolve, and the unwavering commitment to one's own values.